Welcome, everyone. I'm Kathy Marks, the IT Accessibility Coordinator at Enterprise Technology and the program lead for the ASU Digital Accessibility Liaisons. So if you're new, welcome, and thank you so very much for joining us this afternoon. We've got a very full schedule today. First, we have some accessibility news and updates for you. And then we're going to go into our training on how to test web pages for accessibility. Of course, after the presentation, we'll have another WebAIM accessible document course giveaway. Just a heads up, you must be present online to win. And then finally, for anyone who is able to, stick around after the meeting for more open discussion about, well, whatever's on your mind. So first, for some news and updates, I was asked to mention that Change the World runs today from 5 to 8 in Sun Devil Stadium. It's been raining here in Tempe, so I'm not sure, where the kids are going to be, but the Change the World Showcase and Competition celebrates the imagination, efforts, and achievements of ASU students through art displays, idea pitches, live performances, and solutions exhibits. You can get more information at eos.asu.edu, Change the World. For those of you who want to learn to create accessible math equations online and in digital documents, ASU's Learning Experience is offering one more Equatio workshop this month. That'll be on Wednesday, March 22nd. So you can see the lx.asu.edu/workshops for more information and to sign up. Last, the EdTech Open House is gearing up to be a major event. The open houses will take place on 5 different days from 10 to 2 each day, and they'll be on all the different campuses, twice, I think, 2 days on Tempe. Each open house will have 9 stations where instructional designers will offer digestible 20-minute demos on tools to boost accessibility, peer collaboration, etc. We still need people to help staff the accessibility table for all 5 dates. Everyone who's facilitating at the accessibility table we've gotten together once so far. We're collaborating on one 15-minute presentation. And so during each of the open houses, we just take turns repeating that presentation as faculty and instructors wander around and look at all the different stations. And yes, there will be drinks and nibbles. So for more information and to sign up, visit bit.ly/ET accessibility, all one word, ET accessibility. Does anybody have any announcements? Anything you think the group should know about? Just unmute and let us know. Okay. All right. Well, if something occurs to you, maybe we can get to it in the open discussion at the end. So let's jump to our, hold on just a second, let me get my slides up here. Let's jump to our workshop for today. So today we're going to learn how to test a web page for accessibility. Now, I realize many of you will never need to use this skill, especially if you work primarily with documents or courses and course materials, but you might get questions about it. And testing is such an integral part of accessibility. It's something that all liaisons should at least have an understanding of. So the goal today isn't that you should be able to conduct accessibility tests on your own. That would take too much time. Instead, our objective is to introduce you to the tools and tests used so that you'll be comfortable with the topic and you'll be able to research and find out more either for yourself or to help a colleague who's asked you for some help. So in this talk, we're going to cover what we're measuring a web page against, those standards. Then we're going to validate the HTML. We're going to learn about some useful automated browser-based accessibility checkers. We're going to find out how to manually test for keyboard-only access. And finally, we're going to learn how to use a screen reader to test for accessibility. Yes, we really are. We're going to try it anyway. It's okay if we fail. just going to give it a try. It's a lot to cover in an hour. So if I go too fast or you have questions, please don't hesitate to speak up and ask me to repeat or explain something. Interrupting is encouraged during these talks. So you can also put questions in the chat and we'll answer as many of them as possible at the end. So there's a help page for this workshop. Again, it's bit.ly/3ZCIN6Z. It has links to keyboard shortcut cheat sheets, browser accessibility checkers we'll be using, and other resources. If you haven't already done so, please go to that page now and download the keyboard-only cheat sheet and the cheat sheet for whichever screen reader you're going to be using. If you're on a Windows machine and you haven't already downloaded NVDA, go now to nvaccess.org/download and click on the orange download button. You should have enough time to download and install the software during the first part of this workshop. If you're on a Mac, please grab a copy of the VoiceOver cheat sheet because you'll be using the VoiceOver screen reader, which already comes loaded on every Mac. Finally, if you don't have a web page that you'd like to test, you can go to one of the demo test pages supplied on that workshop help page. These test pages intentionally have common accessibility issues, so they're very useful for helping learn how to test. So before we actually test a web page, we need to understand what we're testing and what the criteria are for our tests. What are we testing against? I'm going to take you through a very quick overview of the W3 specifications that are used to, internationally used, to build, talk about, and test for accessible web pages and other digital content. Now, this is just a high-level preview to familiarize you with which specifications are important and what they are for. If you're a developer, we'd expect you to know these documents pretty well. But if you're not, you should know that they exist and what their main purpose is. The first standard I want to talk about is the HTML specification. As you already know, HTML, which stands for Hypertext Markup Language, is the backbone of the web, the basic building blocks that make it up. Every page on the web consists of plain old text that is tagged or marked up with HTML to identify what sort of element it is. Once a browser knows what type of element a chunk of text is, then it knows how to display it on the screen. Likewise, a screen reader will see the tag and announce it. So screen reader users know that the text was a heading 2, or a list item in a list of 4 items, and so on. The W3C publishes the HTML specification so that everyone from laptop manufacturers to software and website developers to the people who create content on the web, they all have one agreed upon way of creating and adding elements to web pages. That's how we make sure everything works the same on every device, including assistive technologies and even devices that haven't been invented yet. The problem is that not everyone understands the importance of this standardization. This is why we have to test to make sure that website pages use standard HTML. The second standard I want to mention is the ARIA specification. HTML has one major drawback. It's pretty limited. The only interactive elements it has are form controls. So like text inputs and checkboxes in a form, links, and then of course buttons. But what if you want something more interactive on a web page, like an accordion or a video with a pause and play button or a slideshow? HTML does not have tags for these things. So developers have to make them up using generic HTML elements like divs and spans, and then trying to use JavaScript to make the component do something. And of course, every developer is going to build their own video pause and play button differently. Even worse, these unique customized elements don't have any way to talk to assistive technologies. So how do we standardize these custom components so they all work the same on all devices, including assistive technologies like screen readers? That is where the Accessible Rich Internet Applications, or ARIA, comes in. It's like a supplement to HTML, and it gives developers a language to talk to assistive technologies and tell them what to do. In addition, ARIA has a section called the Authoring Practices. For custom components like slideshows or video play buttons, the HTML doesn't have tags for. ARIA gives us design patterns. So instead of everyone going off and making up the code for an interactive component, on their own in their own way, the ARIA authoring practices gives us a standard for what some of the most common components should look and act like. For those of you who are not developers, just remember that ARIA is an important supplement to HTML that allows developers to talk with assistive technologies and that provides design patterns for custom components. So with these two standards, ARIA and HTML, you'd think that everything would be fine. Companies creating software and everyone putting sites and content on the web would follow those standards and everything will be accessible to everyone. Unfortunately, that's not the case. HTML and ARIA are not always used per the standards. And this is where our third document, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG, comes in. WCAG explains how to make web content more accessible to people with disabilities, including how to use HTML and ARIA, but it even goes further. So this is a lot of information I've thrown at you, but if you only remember one thing, this is it, WCAG. It's the W3C specification for making the web and digital content accessible. When we say that a site is accessible or is compliant with accessibility standards, this is the document we're talking about. WCAG is made up of 13 guidelines at the moment. Version 2.2 is supposed to come out, I think, this summer, and that will add a few more. The guidelines are prioritized as level A, AA, or AAA, with AAA being the strictest. At ASU, we're only legally required to comply with WCAG level A and AA. The guidelines are technology agnostic, so we can use WCAG to test web pages, online courses, even digital documents like Word docs or email for accessibility. Personally, I prefer the quick ref version of WCAG. I think it's easier to find things in it, and it's a little easier to read. An example of a guideline is Success Criterion 1.2.2 captions. So this is just an example of one of them. It says this is a level A guideline, and it says captions are provided for all pre-recorded audio content in synchronized media, except when the media is a media alternative for text and is clearly labeled as such. But in other words, pre-recorded videos have to have captions. If they do, they're accessible and then they're in compliance with WCAG. So each guideline includes examples of what it means to meet or fail that criteria. They also link to further discussion and documentation. So that's kind of a very quick summary of the HTML specs, the ARIA specs, and the WCAG guidelines. Does anybody have any questions? I see there's something in the chat here.
Yeah, that was from me, Kathy. I was just asking if you could repeat the guidelines that we're required to comply with at ASU.
Right.
The levels of them.
That would be, we have to comply with WCAG level A and AA. So A is like the simplest, AA is kind of a little bit tougher, and AAA is really tough. We have to comply with AA, which includes the A's.
And at what point does AAA, so obviously we're not required to comply with that, but what point does that kind of come into play usually?
I would say anybody who, legally we don't have to comply with it, but a lot of people do anyway because they want people with accessibilities to be able to access their content. There are a little more strenuous requirements. Anybody can do that if they want to. We're definitely not stopping people from complying with AAA. It's just you're kind of going above and beyond if you do.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Mhm. All righty. So I thank you guys for hanging on there while I cover the documents that spell out what accessibility means. Kind of, it's a little dry, but now let's get to the fun part. Let's actually do some testing. So I want to mention that a lot of people, I said some, whatever, use a checklist that maps to WCAG. There are a lot of them out there. The Alley project has a very good one, and so does WebAIM. The links for those are on the meeting resource page, so you can take a look at their checklists. For myself, I found it more convenient to let the tools I'm using dictate my test steps. So first I validate the HTML, then I run an automated checker, then I conduct a keyboard only test, and then I finally test with a screen reader. And I could be jumping around with testing different things in WCAG, depending on the tool that I'm using at that time. If I ever get some time, fingers crossed, I'll map all of my steps out to WCAG, but so far I haven't had a chance. But if you do prefer to use a checklist, look at the Alley project and the WebAIM. Those are both really good ones. So the first thing I always do in an accessibility audit is check the underlying HTML. Because accessibility relies on semantic, well-formed HTML markup, checking your markup is always a good first step. So let's go to the validator. If you want to follow along, please go to the W3C's new HTML checker, and it's at validator.w3.org/NU.
The new HTML checker or validator is very easy to use. Let's just check all the options so that we get the maximum amount of feedback. And then just for the heck of it, let's check the ASU homepage. Now, you will get a lot of returns, no matter what the page is. Errors, alerts and warnings, as well as errors. So I advise you to use this message filtering to summarize the findings. This clumps multiple occurrences of the same issues together and makes the results much easier to read, which could be a mixed blessing if you have a lot of HTML markup problems. I'm joking, but some of the errors may surprise you. Correct everything that you're able to.
So after using the HTML checker, I usually run an automated accessibility checker over the page. These checkers test the page against WCAG. Most of them allow you to adjust the level of guidance you want to test against. So if they let you, and most of them do, change it to level AA. There are a lot of these checkers out there, but we'll talk about the 3 or 4 best. Most of these tools are browser-based, and they're very useful for quickly scanning and detecting some of the most common accessibility problems. While checkers will only catch about 1/3 of the possible accessibility issues, that still leaves you, it saves you a lot of time. And I've always been a fan of doing things the fastest and easiest way. The Axe Dev Tools extension from DEC, or DQ, however you say it, particularly for Chrome, is very popular. See the workshop help page for a link to download the extension. It's available for Chrome, Firefox, and Edge. Sorry, apologize for my puppies are yelling, sparking. Let's look at the Mr. Bean site with the Axe Dev Tools.
So in Chrome Inspector, you just go to the Axe Dev Tools tab and click Scan all of my page or part of my page, and the extension will generate a nice report. Now, we have a lot of issues here. but we expected that because the Mr. Bean page was built with them. So to facilitate testing. So, but you can see that the tool gives you a description of the error, where it appears in the source code, and instructions on how you can fix it. All in all, if you're already in there and using DevTools, this is a nice addition to your existing workflow. So in Chrome Inspector, you just
XDevTools is a really good tool, especially for developers who are already using the inspection tools. There's another tool that uses the Xcore library. It's called Lighthouse. And since it uses the same library, you'd think the results would be similar to Axe Dex tool. However, you won't get as many results from Lighthouse as you might get from the other tools, mainly because Lighthouse doesn't report on anything that could be a false positive. So it's nice in one way, but it means that the extension misses a lot of potential problems that other tools will let you know about. The Wave extension from WebAIM gets better results, in my opinion. There's a link to download the extension on the workshop help page, and the extension is available for Chrome, Firefox, and Edge. So here's how Wave looks when we run it on the Mr. Bean page.
If we run Wave on our Mr. Bean page, you can see it gives us errors as well as some alerts or warnings, which in this case are actually issues that were missed by Axe Lighthouse and DevTools. Wave is nice because the info icon or the reference pane gives you a more in-depth explanation of what's wrong and how to fix it. It will show you the exact spot on the code where the issue occurs, though that feature is maybe a little clunky. The heading structure on the Bean page shows what a great feature this can be. There's only one heading on this page, which is not good. Both it and the color contrast tool are built into the tool. If we
at this time, I think the best extension is probably Site Improves. It's available for Chrome, Firefox, Edge, and Opera, and there's a link on the help page to download it. In side-by-side tests on the Mr. Bean page, it found more positive accessibility issues than either Wave or Axe, with the exception of detecting missing landmarks and duplicate IDs. If those are particularly important to you, you could use Wave or Axe for those specifically. Site Improve does occasionally give you duplicate issues because they map errors directly to WCAG guidelines, and an error could break more than one guideline. Otherwise, I've found its results to generally be the most comprehensive and usable. So here's what Site Improve looks like.
So if we run the Site Improve accessibility checker on the Mr. Bean page, it's going to find a ton of our intentional accessibility errors. You can see it has a really nice user interface with errors, warnings, and alerts. You can click into an error and see the guidelines that it violates, a description of the issue, and suggestions on how to fix the problem. It clumps all of the occurrences of an issue so you can fix them together, potentially saving yourself time. And you can view the problems either on the display, as in here, or if you open DevTools, in the code itself. So
this is a really nice tool, I think. It's probably one of my favorite. Does anyone have any questions about using browser extension accessibility checkers?
I think those are great, though. I really like the Site Improve one the best, too, from what you showed.
It seems to be the most comprehensive, I think. Covers the most, and I like the language that it uses to explain why it's a problem and how to fix it. Because, what good does it do telling me something's a problem if I don't know how to fix it? So after automatic testing, I next test for keyboard only access. That means I'm going to navigate the web page using only my keyboard. So no mouse or touch pad. As I'm talking, try moving around a web page yourself. You'll use the tab key to move forward. Shift tab will move you backward. Use the arrow keys inside field sets of radio buttons and widgets like drop downs. And use the enter return key, sometimes the space bar, to select. You can refer to the keyboard only access cheat sheet from the workshop help page for keyboard shortcuts. Keyboard testing is so important. Some people prefer using the keyboard over the mouse. Others simply aren't able to use a mouse. And still others choose they're required to use technologies like eye tracking, game controls, switches, speech to text, handwriting to text, touch screens, and more. Most assistive technologies map to the keyboard. So on your site or app, if you can perform all the functionality with just the keyboard, there's a good chance your page will also work with most assistive technologies. So in this stage, I usually pay special attention to custom interactive components, such as sliders, accordions, carousels, pop-ups, and so on. These are those interactive widgets we talked about that have been created from divs or spans because there's no native HTML element available. Most accessibility problems occur when we have to create custom components or if we use markup in non-standard ways. I make sure that everything I can do with a mouse, for instance, starting and stopping a video, can also be performed via the keyboard. If tabbing takes me into a pop-up window, I'm able to move it inside it and to close it and to go back to the page when I'm done. So here's Rob Dobson from Google showing how he tests for hidden focusable elements during a keyboard-only accessibility check. See if you can follow along with him.
Experience. So the other thing that I like to look out for is as I'm tabbing around the page, I want to make sure that there's no off-screen content that can accidentally be focused. So follow me over here. I've got this this material design light sort of like template site that the team has created. And notice that it has this sort of like sidebar over here. And as I'm tabbing, focus moves into that sidebar, right? Now, let's say I shrink the page a little bit. Right. So it's totally possible that someone could have their browser this size on their desktop. And let's try and tab through this now. So I tab through this, right? My focus is over here on the top left, or sorry, top right in that search field. Now it's on that button. Now, as I'm pressing tab, though, we don't see the focus indicator. It's as if it has disappeared. And we keep tabbing, and eventually it's going to show back up. Did you see it down here at this like read more button? So what was going on there? Well, if we expand again, we can see that actually what was happening was focus was sort of hidden in these off-screen fields. It was over here in our side nav. And so I see this on a lot of websites, and this can trip up, anybody who's using a keyboard to navigate, and it can kind of trip up mobile screen readers because you have something off screen, but it's still in the tab order. It's still focusable. So a screen reader might travel into those off-screen elements. You might have dialogues off screen, you might have side nav off screen, and you don't actually want the user to be clicking on those during that current state. So that's another thing that I look out for. I want to make sure that people are disabling off-screen interactive content, making sure it's removed from the tab order.
So the rule of thumb here is if any interactive element on your website is skipped or receives the focus in an illogical order, or if you can't see where the focus is at any time, then keyboard support is not properly implemented. Does anybody have any questions about keyboard only testing? Anyone? Okay, let's move on. So actually, we're going to get to the part of the show that maybe a lot of you have been waiting for, screen reader testing. Screen reader testing, it isn't easy, but it's probably not as difficult as you imagined it either. Like learning to use any new piece of sophisticated software, it's going to take you a few tries. I always test in at least one screen reader. The most popular screen reader for Windows, as you can see here, is still JAWS. but the free and open source NVDA is gaining ground. If you're on a Windows machine, I hope you've been able to download and install NVDA by now. I promise we'll get back to you in about 10 minutes. If you're on a Mac, you already have a screen reader installed on your machine called VoiceOver. We're going to follow along with Rob Dobson again to enable VoiceOver and start using it. You can refer to the VoiceOver keyboard shortcut cheat sheet in the resources to help you navigate. If you don't already have a web page you want to explore, you can test the Mr. Bean page or any of the other demo pages listed on the workshop help page. So here's Rob Dobson from Google again. Follow along with him to try to get VoiceOver up and running.
So on the Mac, the screen reader that we've got built in is called VoiceOver. And if you follow me over here to my laptop, I'm going to go to my system preferences. I'm going to go to the accessibility setting right here. And then there's a tab, and zoom in a little bit so you can see it. So there's this little tab over here for VoiceOver, and click on that. And there's a few options that we have to actually activate VoiceOver. We could go and just check this checkbox and our laptop would start talking and we would be like, whoa, I don't know what's going on. Or we could go down here to VoiceOver training. Now, I highly recommend everyone take maybe about 20 minutes to go through this. I'm going to kind of give you like an abbreviated version. So I'll turn the sound on my laptop. Let's see, we'll zoom back out a little bit. We're going to open up VoiceOver training, and this is just going to guide us through some of the fundamentals of using the screen reader.
Welcome back. Welcome back to the VoiceOver Quick Start.
Okay, so I'm gonna talk over this dude a little bit here. You know what? I'm gonna mute you for a second. So when we open this up, it's gonna be really, really big text, and that's because screen readers are often used by folks who might not be completely blind, but they might have low vision. So we want to make sure the text is large enough for them to read. And it's just going to present some instructions. It's about 22 little slides that you can click through, so it doesn't take long at all. And it's basically just going to walk you through some of the basic control keys for VoiceOver. Now, I'm going to give you the cheat sheet version. When you turn VoiceOver on your Mac, really, there's only a handful of keys that most developers are going to need to know. The first thing is this idea of the VoiceOver or the VO modifier key, which on the Macintosh is Control-Alt. So not Command-Alt, but Control-Alt. So all throughout the instructions, you'll see it referencing things where it says like press VO-right arrow. So that always means just press Control-Alt, right arrow. To navigate the page very easily, you can use Control-Alt, right arrow. That'll just kind of move you around the screen. If you want to move by something like headings, which I'll demonstrate a bit later, you can use Control-Alt, Command-H. And I'll just jump through the major headings in your document. And you can also use Control-Alt, spacebar to click on things. And really, those three keys are going to get you pretty far. If you're just sort of testing and auditing your website to make sure it has some decent functionality, you can just use that handful of commands to get most of what you need. So let me show you an example of actually using this. We're going to go ahead to this little section here, which has a few controls down at the bottom. It's a little small. I can't really zoom in that easily on this, but bear with me here. And what I'm going to do is click the Start Practice button. And as soon as I do that, it's going to turn VoiceOver on my laptop. So I'm going to stop talking and we'll just sort of like follow what's going on the screen. So turn volume on.
VoiceOver on VoiceOver Quick Start. Move around the screen. Window. Show all comments. Selected. Radio button. 1 of 2 has keyboard focus.
Okay, so it started saying a bunch of things. I'm actually going to hit the Control key. And anytime you hit the Control key, that basically tells VoiceOver, just stop talking. Sometimes what it likes to do, if it's sort of sitting, idling on the screen, it'll just sort of like start talking again and remind you of where you are, which can be kind of annoying. So right now, what it's saying is that we are focused on this one radio button control. And we're going to use the VO keys, Control-Alt, and the right arrow to move to the next control.
Hide all comments. Radio button. 2 of 2.
And we can keep hitting Control-Alt, right arrow to move down to this section of settings.
Settings. Announce alert messages. Settings. Uncheck speak selected text settings. Unchecked checkbox.
I'm just going to hit Control to tell it to be quiet. Now, if I want to click on this checkbox, I can use the VO and spacebar.
Check speak selected text settings. Checkbox.
And when you do that, it's basically like a simulated mouse click. So, if you have a click handler, for instance, it would get triggered by that Control-Alt space key. You might have noticed that my screen reader was reading a little fast. if you want to change the rate that VoiceOver speaks at, you can hit Control Alt Command up.
Pitch 55%, 60%, 65%,
Or down.
60%, 55, 50%.
You can also hit Control Alt left and right to sort of move through various other options. So
100%.
volume,
Intonation 50%.
intonation.
Voice Alex.
You can change the speaker, right? So you can have Bruce or Fred, Kathy.
Vicky, Victoria.
Okay, I usually stick with
Alex.
Alex, he's my man. So I think we've covered all the sort of the fundamentals of just sort of moving around. Why don't we try this on an actual website now? So I'm going to hit, here you go, good shortcut, Command F5
VoiceOver off.
to turn VoiceOver off. Command F5 is also how you turn it on.
Move around the screen.
Oh wait, sorry, I gotta get out of this tutorial. Mwah. Command F5,
VoiceOver on system preferences. Accessible VoiceOver off.
there we go, turn it on and off. Command F5 is a very, very useful command. It's also one of those things which if you've ever hung out at like the Apple Genius Bar, people accidentally hit that all the time and bring their laptops to the Genius Bar to be like, I don't know what's happening, make it stop. Command F5, in case one of your relatives like sits on their laptop or something and has a freak out at Christmas, Command F5. Okay, so let's go and actually look at an actual website. So I'm going to go to Wikipedia. Wikipedia has really, really nice accessibility. We're just going to let's look up Google itself, the company. Okay. And now there's a lot of information on this page. And one way that you could imagine someone using a screen reader is they just turn it on and they just start moving laterally through everything. So let's try that and see what that's like.
VoiceOver, Google, Wikipedia, the free encyclopedia, HTML content.
I'm gonna hit Control so I'll have to stop talking. Oftentimes when you open a website, you need to hit Control Alt Shift down.
Google, Wikipedia, the free encyclopedia.
That will tell VoiceOver I would like to interact with this this page right now. Otherwise, it's gonna try and move you through the rest of like the Mac UI, which you don't want. You want to actually interact with what's in Chrome. And now we're gonna hit Control Alt right arrow, the VO right arrow keys to just move through all the content.
Internal link image hide link /60px wiki underline link wiki loves monuments the world link image page semi protected heading level 1 Google.
Okay, so that was like slow. I have not even gotten into the main meat of the article yet, and I'm already kind of tired of clicking on this thing. And so what we found was through a recent survey conducted by Hayden Works or Hayden Pickering, I think is his last name. Really cool developer who does a lot of cool accessibility work. He sent out a survey to ask screen reader users, how do you typically navigate the page? And the overwhelming response is most people initially, when they first land on a page, navigate by headings. So remember to do that, we hit Control Alt Command H. So let's see if this makes our experience a bit more efficient.
Heading level 2, contents, heading level 2, history, heading level 3, financing, 1-9, heading level 3, growth.
Okay, cool. So I feel like that was sort of just a more productive way to move through the document. One thing you might notice is sometimes as we're moving through a web page, VoiceOver will not scroll the screen for us all the time if we're just like jumping around by heading. And so if you just hit Control Alt right arrow,
March 199 link, Palo Alto.
It'll start to kind of jump down to the text content itself. It actually, you know, if you're using a screen reader, it kind of doesn't matter if it's not scrolling. But if you are, you know, a sighted user and you're trying to debug something, sometimes you have to fiddle with it a little bit to make it actually scroll and move how you want it to. Another really interesting thing that we can do here, this is sort of like the Uber shortcut, is we can hit Control Alt U. And that's going to open what's known as the rotor. And the rotor is a menu just full of options relating to the current thing that you're interacting with. So I'll hit Control Alt U.
No items in web spots menu.
And I'll hit the right arrow and we can just flip through a bunch of different options for the page.
Tables menu.
All the tables.
Landmarks menu.
All the landmarks. So HTML5 landmark elements, things like main, article, aside. The reason why those elements are important is for things like this. It actually lets someone just jump directly to your navigation.
Window spots menu, links menu, headings menu.
All the links, all the headings, etc. So this is a really, really useful tool, the rotor, just to, you know, if you jump around kind of like a power user.
So for those of you on Windows, I chose NVDA for you to download today because first, it's free. And also it's not as gigantic and complex a piece of software as JAWS is. NVDA is perfectly acceptable for most accessibility testing, and it's quickly gaining popularity among users with vision impairments, primarily because it's free, but also because it works. If you'd like, please use the NVDA keyboard shortcut cheat sheet as you follow along with Rob Dobson again to get NVDA going on your PC.
Downloaded NVDA, so I'm just kind of ready to rock. So what I'm going to do is fire it up using Control-Alt-N.
Welcome to NVDA dialog. Welcome to NVDA.
So I'm going to hit the caps lock key to tell it to chill and stop talking for a sec. Similar to VoiceOver on the Mac, NVDA has kind of like a special NVDA modifier key, which normally is mapped to the insert key. But this dialog also lets you map it to the caps lock key, which is quite helpful if you're on a laptop. There's a few other options in this dialog, like always show the dialog when it starts, or start NVDA when you open up Windows. But again, to fire it up, you hit Control-Alt-N. That's how you start the thing. I'm going to hit OK, though, because I think I'm good on these options.
Okay. Access now.
And then again, I can hit caps lock whenever I want to tell NVDA to stop talking. So what I'm going to do is give you sort of like a brief tour of how to navigate the page using NVDA. So I've got a JS bin that I've created that just has a few simple controls on it, and this will get us familiar with some of the basics of moving around in the screen reader. So I'm on this page here. This page just has a few headings, some paragraphs of text, and an input field with a sign up button next to it, right? So simple button element. So we know that most screen reader users, when they land on an unfamiliar document, are going to navigate by heading. And to do that in NVDA, we use the H key. So let's try that out.
Second heading, heading level 2. Third heading, heading level 3.
So the H key moves us forward through the headings. Shift H is going to move us backwards.
Second heading, first heading, heading level 1.
We can also move by line by pressing the up and down arrow key. So if I hit the down arrow key, we'll just move down to the next paragraph of text.
The first paragraph is full of introductory content. This is where.
Right. We can also move by individual character too. And this is useful for screen reader users when they land on a word that maybe the text-to-speech software pronounces poorly. So like the word Udacity, it'll probably pronounce it in kind of a weird way. And so they might navigate through the individual characters to see how it's actually spelled. So to do that, we just hit the left and right arrow keys.
H, E, space, F, I, R.
Right. Pretty easy. Now, what separates NVDA from a screen reader like VoiceOver is that NVDA is a modal screen reader, meaning when you're in VoiceOver, you're kind of always in the same mode. You're sort of always browsing around. You can kind of just interact with things whenever you want. And that's because VoiceOver uses kind of an elaborate set of keyboard shortcuts to move around the screen. With NVDA, because the shortcuts are sort of more abbreviated, right? They're just single characters and things like that. It means that when we land on something like a form control, we need to tell the screen reader to switch into a special mode so we can interact with that form. So let's try that out. So I've got some form elements down here. If I want to jump to the next available form element on the page, I can hit the F key.
Edit as autocomplete hello world.
So you can see that put me on this text field. I can jump to the sign up button by hitting it again.
Sign up button.
And just like we saw with headings, Shift F is going to move us backwards.
Edit as autocomplete hello world.
Now, if I were to hit the H key to start typing in this field, what it's actually going to do, though, is just move me to the next heading because we haven't told the screen reader to enter forms or focus mode yet. So to do that, we'll use the NVDA key, which remember is caps lock, and the space bar. And you hear that little tone, right? That little sort of typewriter sound. That tells the screen reader user that, hey, now you're in forms mode. You can start typing text kind of free form. So I could say, hello world.
O-W-T-F-G.
Because I had the caps lock key on, it's typing in all caps. But you get the idea, right? You can type in the text field whenever you want. Now to exit forms mode, we basically do the same thing with the NVDA key and spacebar, or caps lock and spacebar to get out. And again, it'll play a little tone to tell us that we're exiting forms mode. Now, the last thing I want to show you is application mode. So sometimes when you're interacting with a more complex controls, something like a tree or a tab panel or something like that, the ARIA roles that you have on that element instruct the screen reader to enter application mode. And in that mode, it's just going to pass through all the key presses that you hit right to the control. And that way the control can handle all those keyboard events and sort of implement its own handling. To give you an example, I'm going to go to the very useful ARIA authoring practices guide, and I'm going to find a pattern of a sort of a complex control. So I'm going to find a tab panel.
Combo box. Tab panel. Tab 2 point.
And
Tab.
With these complex elements, oftentimes the authoring practices guide provides an example implementation. So if I scroll to the bottom of the tab panel, it will give me an example I can interact with.
Bullet the tabbed interface be directed. Open example tab.
Okay, so here's an example tab panel on the Open Ajax site. I'll scroll this a little bit to make it easier to see. Right, that's all in frame. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start interacting with this control. So
Applications.
just click on it once.
Application. Tab control. Crust tab selected 1 of 4.
And so it told us it's a tab control. It told us that it's a tab selected 1 of 4. And because we're now in application mode, even though it's not playing like a special sound or anything like that, we can actually move through these elements using just the arrow keys on our keyboard. So for instance, we have the right arrow key.
Menus tab select. Carnivore tab. Delivery tabs.
Right, that's going through and selecting different tabs. I could also hit up and down arrow keys.
Crust tab. Carnivore tab selected.
So far, so good. And if I want to move into the contents of the tab panel itself, I can hit the tab key on my keyboard.
Carnivore property page. Select carnivore.
And then we can just tab through these and hit spacebar to sort of check or uncheck the checkboxes as needed.
Space checked.
And then shift tab to get back to the tabs.
Tab control. Carnivore tab. Crust tab select.
Right, so far so good. Let's see, the last thing that I want to show off is kind of a really cool and useful mode. I think it's called like elements mode. So you hit caps lock and F7. So what this is going to do is basically go through, and if you remember from the voiceover tutorial, we talked about the rotor and how you can jump to headings and landmarks and links using the rotor. So you don't have to navigate through every single thing on the page manually. The elements list is basically the exact same thing for NVDA. So we can see a list of links. If we
filter by edit alt plus
tab and get down to a filter field, so we could filter down to one particular link that we're looking for. We can shift tab to go back to the top.
Tree type grouping links.
Use the arrow keys to move to, for instance, headings.
Headings radio button checked alt plus H.
And then we can use the up and down arrow keys to select one of these headings.
Links radio button checked alt. Headings radio button tree view open and level 1 examples and main landmark examples.
And that'll take us to that.
Again, as with keyboard only testing, I concentrate on testing those interactive and custom elements and components with the screen reader. Automated scanning will have picked up many of the static accessibility issues like heading order and whether headings are marked as headings. So it makes sense to focus on any features the user can interact with, any elements or components triggered by events on the page. Like for instance, maybe you have pop-up alerts or error messages, elements that capture or manipulate focus, like a modal or a pop-up box or dialogue, elements that are hidden, like collapsed accordions, hidden tab content or carousel cells where the rest of the slides are hidden. So we're going to see, I think we have time for this. We're going to see Rob Dobson showing you how to test some custom components.
I also want to make sure that if there are custom controls like buttons and things like that that have been implemented using either custom elements or using like divs with a bunch of JavaScript, that those are interactive with the screen reader.
Men's heading level 5 size collapsed pop-up button.
Okay, so we're on this dropdown. It says size collapsed pop-up button. Let's try and use VoiceOver to interact with this. So I'll click on it.
Menu 5 items check mark in.
Okay, it's reading me the number of items. And now I want to use just like my regular arrow keys to move around inside of this control. So up, down, right, left, right, things like that. So go down to extra large, hit enter, right?
Closing menu, XL, size, collapsed pop-up button.
Okay, that's something that I look for, right? Any custom control is working as I would expect with the keyboard. The other thing I know about this site is when I add something to the cart, it's going to sort of add like a little sort of a like modal pop-up type thing that'll show up on screen. And so I want to make sure that the screen reader user is notified of that, possibly by moving their focus into that item. So let's do that.
S, menu item, stop interact quantitative, add a feed list, bullet, and add this item to cart button. Press add item added to the cart. Added to cart. 4 items interact with added to cart. View cart. Checkout close dialog. VoiceOver off.
So you can see that when the item was added to the cart, the screen reader focus was directed into that thing that just slid out on screen. So I know the way the Palmer team is doing this, if I recall, is they've got something in there with a tab index of -1, and they're focusing that element just to direct our focus. So that's another thing that I watch out for, making sure if something is being dynamically added to the page, that focus is directed to it. So that
gives you a little bit of an idea of what it's like to test for those components. So as I said, this is a very high level overview of what accessibility testing consists of. I've thrown an awful lot of information at you in a very short time. So if you're feeling a little like our friend here, don't despair. We're recording this session and we'll post on the resources page. You can also look over the testing section on the accessibility site. Does anyone have any questions about using the screen reader?
So how does it, if you had somebody that has an injury or something, is there something else that they would want to use instead of a screen reader? Because it seems like you have to use a lot of commands.
If you have a vision problem, screen readers are really great because you can do a lot with them. Yeah, there are a lot of commands. Like Rob Dobson said, for testing, the amount of keys you have to use is, pretty minimal. We're just running around making sure everything opens and we can select things. But for someone who has a vision problem or they're blind, I think a screen reader is the assistive technology you want to use. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it just seems like it would be really complex for somebody like if I was thinking of somebody who's like, for instance, older, and for them to learn how to use technology to navigate a website might be very difficult with all the different controls. I think that'd be I just was wondering like if that's tackled at all. There's something out there.
I think that they can take lessons on how to use a screen reader. And again, I would use it, very slowly. I know my mom is in her 80s and I've tried to teach her to use an iPad without a mouse or anything, a keyboard. And, that's difficult. So I think technology in general is difficult. But I don't think using a screen reader is any more difficult than using a mouse or a keyboard and stuff.
Okay.
It's just that we're used to the mouse and the touchpad.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I did not intend for us to learn how to use a screen reader today. This is just to give you a chance to play around with it a little bit so that you can explore further. If you have any questions about using a screen reader, ask me or ask on the Slack channel, because I know that there are people on there who are familiar with it as well. So we only have 3 minutes left and I really want to get to this. Again, we're giving away an online accessibility documents course from WebAIM. It can be used anytime in 2023. The next course begins April 3rd and it runs through sometime in July, maybe the 4th of July. The course is normally $125. So this is really nice if that WebAIM has donated to us to give away. So last time I forgot to show you guys the turning. Can you guys all see the wheel? Do you see that wheel?
Yeah.
Yes.
Good. Okay. So I put everybody's name in. It's like 70 plus names in here. So let's give this a try. Bruce Bailey.
I am here.
Yay, Bruce. All right. All right, well, I will send you the code. Again, you can take this course anytime in 2023. And I'll send you the link to where to sign up for it. So
Great.
yay, Bruce.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, everyone. Let's see here. So, once again, I had a marvelous time with all of you. I hope you feel like you've learned something useful this hour. I mean, I know you guys all work so hard and you have so much on your plates already. We want this time to be productive and helpful for you. So I hope to see you again at the next meeting on April 19th, when we will have a panel of students with disabilities discussing their perspectives of digital technology at ASU. So that's going to be really exciting. And so we hope to see you there again next month. Meanwhile, use the ALLY Liaisons Slack channel to ask questions or answer them, share resources, and find out who's doing what in accessibility at ASU. And remember, I'm here for you. If you need anything to help you with your role as an accessibility liaison, just ask. If you're able to, please hang out for a while with us. I'll be here until about 3:30. So if there's something you'd like to discuss, or if you have questions or suggestions, please feel free to unmute and let's get this conversation going. If you can't stay, I understand. Thank you again for spending this hour with us. Thanks, everyone.